Assalamu alaikum everyone, and today we are going to talk about the quadratic formula. Get your scientific calculator ready because today is going to be a very challenging tutorial on algebra, and many people forget these because it's so tough. So we've been learning how to solve quadratics a lot in these algebra basic tutorial. Some are easy, like 4x squared equals to 64. I have to divide everything by 4 so that I have x squared over x squared equals to 16 at a square root, and we get x equals to plus or minus the square plus or minus. But some are a lot harder, like 4x squared plus 2x equals to 64. Now that would be way more harder. We've been learning two strategies, factoring and completing the square. But there are times when none of these would be as easy or even possible. Can we solve the quadratic equation by brute force? There is a strategy which is the quadratic formula. Now, before we actually look into it and memorize it, we have to derive it, so that it makes sense. So, let's use the simple quadratic. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. The equation we learned. And also remember to stick to the end. So that we know if the quadratic formula works. So stay tuned. Now again, back where we were, let's go to the quadratic, the basic quadratic. Then we have to divide by a, remember, so that x squared can be operated alone. That's how it's easier. So a's are crossed out, so it'd be x squared plus b over a x plus c over a equals to 0. Now the second step is to subtract c over a from both sides. So when we do that, we have x squared plus b over a x equals to negative c over a. Now by this, now we have to complete the square. Now using a lot of mathematics, we can see that it is x squared plus b over ax plus b over 4a squared equals to negative c over a plus, now the first one will be a perfect square. So at the first place we have this, but at the second, doing a lot of math, we can look at this. Now for those of you who have studied the quadratic formula, you can see that this side is getting a little more, I think this is familiar type, which is good because we are leading to the quadratic formula soon. Now since we want factors of x, we need to cancel out the exponent. So we have to use that for both sides. At first it will cancel the exponent, leaving this. Now this is not equal to the previous plus x, which used to be b over a times x. So if these look familiar, remember that it's not. So these mathematics weren't useless. But this side is a lot more complicated and game-changing. Now since this, we can now use it as plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Now you might be thinking, Lazar, you didn't exactly solve it, you just added the plus or minus. But remember, this change would be very important. Now, if this is a whole square root, means that there is 2 square roots. One on top and one in the denominator. Now this will be the plus or minus since this can be solved. So this will be 2a since that is the thing. Now how is it 2a? Well, you're going pretty randomly on this. I'm not following. Okay, so the square root of 4 equals to 2 and the square root of a squared equals to a. Now it was square root of 4a squared. Now understand? You should, because this is getting very complicated. Now before we actually continue, I know the derivation is complicated, but this actually shows that it's not just some random bunch that we made, and it works. It's tough, but it works. Now we came up to the conclusion of this. Now this is in the quadratic formula. So now let's put x all by itself. You know, solve for x, what we're trying to do. So this is going to be the one that will change the whole scenario. Now, these are cut, leaving x all by itself, which we'll avoid for a bit of a moment. Now, b over 2a. Now, since this has the same denominator, we can combine the two fractions. So it would be b times plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And we have done it! This is the total derivation of the quadratic formula. Now, if you don't get it or don't remember the steps, that's okay. You can re-watch this video to follow along with the steps. Now we can plug the coefficient to the formula since it has the 3 coefficients, A, B, and C. Now we have to check if it works, or else this would be just a waste of time, right? So let's do this. We have x squared plus 2x minus 3 equal to 0. Now this quadratic formula would be used for any quadratic, not just when factoring and completing the square is impossible. Learning about factoring, we know that this we can do. What we can do is this, and then we can get x equals to 1, negative 3. But we have to use the quadratic formula. Now, using the quadratic formula, a will be 1, b will be 2, and c will be negative 3. Going back to the quadratic formula, you really memorize it in your head when you do the calculation. Let's plug in all these numbers. So b will be 2 and a will be 1 and c will be negative 3 times 2a, which would be 2 times 1. Now this, if we combine all of these, it'll be the square root of 16 plus or minus square root of 16 times 2 over 2. And we have indeed 2 solutions. But first we have to solve the square root, which is 4. So like 2 plus or minus 4 over 2. Now we have two solutions. 2 plus 4 over 2, comma, minus. Now one of these gives 2 over 2, comma, one of these will give negative 6 over 2, which means that it would be 1, comma, negative 3, which was the factoring we done. So this checks that the quadratic formula works. Now, this is for any quadratic, as we have mentioned, but you have to be careful with the arithmetic, so it will be a bit messy. And we also have to note that this part, the plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, you know, from the quadratic formula, which I'm rewriting. So this part, if the square root of b squared minus 4ac is a negative number, then there will be no real solution, which we will replace by imaginary numbers. But we will talk about that in Algebra 2. So, like, that's all there is to it. And I did say, so that's all there is to it. You can subscribe to my channel if you want more math help on tough mathematics like this quadratic formula. So, if you want that help, you can subscribe, you can like, and comment on what you thought of the video, or was this video helpful? Because I really need to know if my tutorials are helping you guys. That's why I'm making videos like these in the first place. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!